All right, we're going to get into a story you've probably never heard before. It's about how some massive fortunes, built on a really dark trade, ended up creating one of the most powerful and secretive political forces of the 20th century.
Yeah, we're talking about the China lobby. Now, this was a group so influential, they helped shape American foreign policy in the Pacific for decades. Think about it. They played a major role in some of the biggest wars of modern history.
So where did this powerful group come from? Well, the answer isn't where you'd expect, like Washington, D.C. Nope, this story actually starts centuries earlier, with a global trade crisis and a highly destructive solution. To really get it, we gotta go back.
Okay, picture this. It's the late 1700s. The British Empire is basically on top of the world. But they have a China problem, and I'm not talking a small one. I mean a massive, empire-threatening economic problem.
So, what was the issue? Well, the British were absolutely obsessed with Chinese goods, especially tea. The new factory worker class couldn't get enough of it. The problem? China just wasn't interested in anything Britain was selling. So you had this huge one-way street for money. Silver was just flooding out of Britain and straight into China's pockets, and it was draining the empire's treasury like crazy.
And this quote, man, this really shows you the mindset. King George III sends his guys over to try and negotiate better trade terms, and this is the answer he gets back. China saw itself as the celestial empire, the center of the universe. To them, Westerners were just barbarians who had nothing they wanted. So from China's point of view, why change a thing? The setup was working perfectly for them.
So, Britain was facing economic disaster. They had to find a product that China would actually buy. Something, anything, to reverse that massive flow of silver. And the solution they came up with? Well, it was devastatingly effective. And completely morally bankrupt.
Now, to really get what this number means, you gotta understand the sheer scale of this operation. Britain controlled India, right? So they basically oversaw 1 million opium farmers. And by 1850, this one single drug was bringing in a staggering 15 to 20% of the entire British Empire's revenue. This wasn't some shady side hustle. This was a core part of their economy, a critical engine.
And this quote from historian Karl Trocki just nails it. This wasn't some small-time criminal thing. The opium trade was literally the foundation of all European business in Asia. And get this, the British government would sell the opium to the East India Company, who then used the Royal Navy and local gangs to smuggle it into China. The result? Millions of people got addicted.
Okay, so the British are making a killing, but they weren't the only ones eyeing this opportunity. After the American Revolution, the brand new United States decided it wanted a piece of that very lucrative China trade.
And guess what? American merchants ran into the exact same problem as the British. Their solution? Yep, the same one. But since Britain had a lock on Indian opium, the Americans got theirs from Turkey. They basically set up their own monopoly on the Turkey to China route, and the profits, they were just astronomical. We're talking an estimated 37.5% return on investment year after year. Some of the most famous families in New England were getting filthy rich off this.
And one of these ambitious young guys was a man named Warren Delano. He was a classic Yankee blue blood. In 1833, at just 24 years old, he sails to China to work for a company called Russell & Company. They were the biggest American opium smuggler around. And let's just say, he was very, very good at his job.
Now, the money Delano made from opium didn't just make him rich. It set his family up for generations. Over time, this dirty money gets cleaned up, you know? It becomes respectable, old money wealth, the kind of money that gives your kids and grandkids a life of luxury and a whole lot of influence.
And this is where the story takes a truly shocking turn. Warren Delano's grandson, his name was Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. Think about that. The very generational wealth that let FDR enter politics without ever worrying about money. Its roots were in his grandfather's opium smuggling fortune from China.
But it wasn't just merchants coming to China on these ships. They brought another group with them. A group with a totally different mission, but one that would be just as transformative for China.
So in the 1830s, American Protestant missionaries start showing up. And as you can see from this report, their goal was ambitious, to say the least. It wasn't just about converting people. They saw it as their duty to completely overhaul Chinese society. They wanted to remake its industry, its social life, its government, all in America's image.
But you can imagine the Chinese people saw things a little differently. They didn't really see a difference between the guys selling poison and the guys preaching salvation. To them, they all showed up on the same ships. The missionaries were just the opium smugglers' friends, just another part of this whole foreign invasion.
So what you have here is a perfect storm. On one side, you've got this incredible commercial greed. On the other, you have this intense missionary zeal. And both of them are crashing head-on to an ancient, proud civilization. The result? Well, it was conflict, humiliation, and a legacy that is still shaping our world today. In 1839, this Chinese official, Commissioner Lin, writes this incredible letter directly to a young Queen Victoria. It's just so powerful and logical. He basically points out the massive hypocrisy. He says, look, you've banned opium in your own country because you know it's harmful. So how can you possibly justify poisoning our country with it just to make a profit?
But Queen Victoria's decision had nothing to do with morality. It was all about the money. The hard economic truth was, as one historian put it, the empire simply could not survive without that opium money. So the response to that heartfelt letter wasn't a discussion, it was the Royal Navy. And that's what kicked off the First Opium War.
And that was just the start of it. For the next 60 years, it was just one conflict after another, a series of wars and rebellions where Western powers, the U.S. included, just used military force to pry China open for business and for their missionaries. It's no wonder that in China today, this whole period is known as the Century of Humiliation.
After the Second Opium War, China basically had to give in on everything. They were forced to legalize opium, they had to let foreigners off the hook for taxes, they had to open up even more of their country to foreign control, and get this, they were even forced to stop using the word barbarian in official documents when talking about Westerners. Total humiliation.
So here's the really crucial takeaway. The exact same historical events created two totally different legacies. For China, it was the century of humiliation that led to their state collapsing and this deep, deep resentment of foreign meddling that lasts to this day. But for America, well, those opium fortunes and that missionary zeal, they came together to create the China Lobby, this incredibly powerful group that would go on to steer U.S. foreign policy for generations.
And that really leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? When you think about it, the deep-seated memories of opium and gunboats on one side, and the almost forgotten history of dirty fortunes and missionary zeal on the other. How does knowing all this, knowing this hidden history, change how you see the complicated relationship between the U.S. and China today?